The role of culture and nature in conflict resolution and peace building. In separation, we fail, and in unity with diversity, we succeed. I think that's a very important thought, that in diversity, but still having connection with each other, we can succeed to get a better world. Separatists, conflicts between countries, minorities against each other, the rise of right-wing trends in politics. These are truly current themes and too important to neglect, we all know. It seems we have become a sort of incarnation of some rather obscure video games controlling us. Everything what is happening right now. When following the news, we are indeed bombarded with non-stop conflicts. Our world seemingly has become almost apocalyptic. Or is it perhaps because we somehow increasingly seek exciting action, thrills, and shivers, and media is thus responding to our demands as consumers, instead that we rather try to balance it? Even political trends follow this fear-mongering approach to reach the electorate or demand from consumers. And with a considerable success, unfortunately, as can be seen with the Brexit referendum, Trump becoming president, Orbán in Hungary, Netanyahu in Israel, but also in Austria and Germany and the Netherlands and even Italy. There's more and more populist parties coming up. The rise of nationalistic parties are all over, and even established liberal parties tending more and more towards a dangerous populist nationalism. Conflicts seem to be created or maintained, hardly solved. We are being polarized instead of kept together. It cannot be denied that we are being fed by fears, but on the other hand, what do we indeed do against it? We have all the tools, more than ever before, to verify an internet, to do research. It's an open library in the internet, yet we use it to spread further fears and even hatred. In Europe, many feel insecure and threatened because of war developments and refugees. Yet statistically, never has Europe been safer, despite some recent terrorist incidents. Thus, people vote for parties which promise more effective police presence, a symptomatic approach, unfortunately, which ignores the fact that we're all connected. Wars paid by Western world cause us to suffer from the consequences as well at the end of the day. Like the refugee crisis caused by the war in Syria and in Iraq. If we harm others, we also harm ourselves at the end of the day. Perhaps good to take a small step back and analyze a bit. What has triggered such a trend, and where could we find a balance? Let me give you some anecdotal examples as an extra illustration from my private life. It may seem irrelevant, but I'm a passionate horse rider. So far so good, but very often while riding through nature, I'm confronted with bikers, both young and old as well, who wildly swish with their two wheels alongside my horse. Sometimes even trying to bravely cut off my horse's path. My horse frequently panicked. And when addressing them, how dangerous and irresponsible this could be for a horse, me or even themselves, believe me, a frightened horse can really kick out in a reflex to defend himself. They shrug either their shoulders, don't seem or want to understand what in goodness name they have to do with that, or even pretend not noticing or hearing. Why such a lack of engagement or empathy, I call it. Another example, slightly different department, but not irrelevant. When being asked where apples and milk come from, the majority of children in our cities seem no longer to realize that apples grow on trees and that cows produce milk. Simply, they obviously come from the supermarket. At the onset, this might look funny, but perhaps this is more serious than we may realize. We have lost connection. We no longer care for an animal, regarding it merely as a thing, and even our fellow person, let alone nature, has become very abstract. We live as if in a cocoon of ourselves with our constant social media. So we can wonder, how social is it indeed? One could argue, and our empathy, our sense of correlation and feeling for the other with our environment also has become almost extinct. We lost basic patience to deal with it. Time is money, and keep it short, please, and next, please. And we lost our capability to analyze, to rethink, to take distance, to understand, to position ourselves in the shoes of the other. It's odd that especially in an era where we can relatively easily travel, visiting exotic cultures, and through internet have access to so much information, but we do not take the time to go deeper and to fathom the visited culture well enough, or to scrutinize news, whether it's indeed true or rather false. We also do business with foreign companies more than ever, but seemingly minor and trivial misunderstandings and not knowing the specific social code of a culture, of the other's culture, causes us to lose considerable deals and damage our business. In our globalized world, we also do hardly realize the effect of expecting our jeans to cost no more than 10 euros in the local store, to name but one example. And culture at home, as perceived by many, culture like music, theater, literature, has become a luxury, outdated, boring, useless, and thus dispensable. Our own heritage is merely a vague, abstract, distant notion, but mind you, still the effective #1 card of nationalist populism. Your culture, our identity is in danger. But when asked what our identity is, you get hardly a sensible answer. So in some countries, classes in drama or literature have completely vanished from the curriculum, not to mention European history or music classes. As a seasoned intercultural business consultant mediator, these aforementioned symptoms are, believe me, very much confirmed every time I deal with new customers. This over-specialization, and it kills not only the understanding of the whole process, but in case of a slight ripple, we jump into costly and painful legal battles, creating even more disparity and more frustration. And we lost the time, the will to reach out. And these elements strengthen inherently the feeling of fear. We start talking of us against them. And politicians use this. Groups in society that have lost touch with their surroundings feel excluded, even misunderstood. And the populist leader who promised to make the nation strong again will earn his victory, unfortunately. Not because of a solution, but explains his sound budgetary vision. Especially as a mediator, I'm in the business of trying to bring back the lost understanding, to make both sides see the motives instead of the points of view. That's very important, because let us not forget, the reason of conflicts is usually that people do not feel heard, they do not feel understood. Once the other party starts to listen actively, a kind of goodwill is created, and then you can work on a creative process of solving the problem. A new world of possibilities would occur when suddenly we notice that we have so many motives in common, just having a home, a family, developing ourselves, having to eat, of course. But to go back to the core of the whole, we lack much understandings of ourselves, first of all, and thus stumble over conflicts often creating rather new ones instead of solving the old, just because we do not see the correlation of the whole. We feel no identity, not even in a nationalist sense, but because we ignore culture as something that shapes us. One perfect example of how culture has become a perfect tool in a conflict is, Daniel Barenboim, music director, with his East-West Divan Orchestra, bringing together young musicians from Israel, Palestine, and other Arab countries who otherwise would never meet or see eye to eye, and then performing wonderfully Beethoven, Schumann, Mozart, or any composer, as if being one harmonious body where artificial political boundaries, nationalities, and mutual prejudice just disappear. You just have the universal language of music, a very positive vibration. And as we meet in a united Germany, weren't both East and West Germans happy to finally get together? Whereas now, nationalist extremism thrives in the former East German states, springing from a frustration of feeling inferior to West Germans. Why did we neglect these signals for so long? We should therefore also bring back a culture of listening again to each other, really listening, empathize, not just with like clicks, but on Facebook or Instagram, but truly interactive dialogues with three-dimensional living people. Education alone will not change this immediately. It will go rather slowly, but this would be a start. Therefore, as a mediator, I try to contribute there where the damage already has been done. But for a more holistic approach, just the total picture, we need a change. Mediation not only as control, as a damage control, but rather as a proactive, preventive tool. Teaching people to be more open from the very onset, to take time for dialogue, and to come back to nature, to integrate that into our mediation model. This is really often very much forgotten by people. I realized that in the classic Latin definition, natura et cultura, nature and culture, is often considered each other's opposites, but this is really the contrary. They belong to each other. Culture is merely a part of nature. Without nature, there's no culture could exist. As we also learn to appreciate the added value of animals, be it in therapy or aiding men being either visually impaired or suffering from diabetes or otherwise. You all know if you have a dog or a cat, for example, that these animals give unconditional love, which goes beyond words, and they can also be helped, can also be used for therapy, really, and life coaching. They teach us to accept ourselves. They also sense blockages in you. And we all know a loved person, which an animal obviously really does, a loved person has more ability to care, give love, and get out of a victim complex, which is really the biggest problem of this world, being a victim or feeling a victim. So also in life coaching, in German we find a very expressive proverb, which is called "In der Ruhe liegt die Kraft," which means in silence, peace of mind lies our power, our strength. Because let us not forget, world peace really starts within ourselves. It starts with each individual, finding his authentic power, finding your own identity. Does not mean the identity your family wants you to have, your society wants you to be, but it means really connecting with your authentic self, in silence, without words. It's about making peace with your light and dark sides, with your wounded sides, and connect your reason with your intuition, also very often forgotten, your emotional power. Not only emphasizing your strong appearance, which men like to do, your academic titles, your professional experience, but also your vulnerability, your vulnerable sides. They are, in general, most powerful and convincing. Only then a person can be balanced and contribute to a harmonious society. Culture is how humans, they shape our environment at home, at work, in our city. for others and for ourselves. And through such a process, any person will vote more responsibly, more consciously, choosing long-term sustainable solutions. We all know that in a harmonic, prosperous society, wealth distribution is fair. If it's fair, there's no feeding ground for, let's say, nationalism or for frustrations, because people feel fulfilled. Personally, just at the end, I feel very much a product of Europe myself, no, not a specific country or nation. And I'm fascinated by conflicts, so their origin and how to eradicate them. And I really think that mediation could be a much more important, have a more important role in pure diplomacy activity, not only for individuals, but companies and really in society. So really the link between the electorate and their representatives, and through also improved education, which is really important. Raising awareness of a functional civil society, improve empathy, bring harmony of culture in our natural environment at any possible level. Because this is really our only environment and where we all should want to live. And in this way, we can only be all together, be winners. So that is really my message to you. So do you have any questions, ideas, thoughts? Yes?
You mentioned several times the word intercultural.
Sorry?
You mentioned the word intercultural.
Yeah.
Intercultural collaboration, mediation,
Yeah.
consulting. For you, where does that start and where does it, like, how far does it go? What is intercultural for you?
Intercultural, well, in a mediation, I first of all look, of course, where do people come from? They tell, I let them talk, first of all, and you will feel already there's a certain culture in it. You have to explain it to the other party, but at a certain moment you also notice there's something systemic in it. I don't know if you know what systemic means. You also mentioned it. It's really your background. It's not just your culture, like eating at 10 o'clock in Spain and so on. It's also your frustrations, which you got somehow unconsciously from your parents, or love or frustration. Everybody has got a wound inside himself. And that you will see also during mediation. And I can only go to a certain point in mediation with two parties, with the cultures. The systemic part I can also do because I like to give more a holistic service. So we have also systemic coaching, conflict coaching as well. So, and there people really come together also. You go deeper into the matter, just not culture, but really also personal. Because I think every person is a cultural already on his own as well. So it's very vague, the border.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. Apologies. My name's Alexa. I'm from Germany.
Oh, good. Okay. Thanks.
And thank you very much, Dr. Sitch.
Yeah, thank you very much.